set until I start talking. And we're live. Welcome, friends. We'll get started in just a moment. I'm going to utilize the chat box. Here is the link for today's program. And this link contains library news, as well as links to our presenter, Clover Hope, and links to, how much we love to make book lists. So there's lots of book lists on here as well. And, oh, I see I didn't put the main book list. Let's see if I can find those really quick. And we'll get started in just a moment. All right, let's go ahead and jump in and I'll do some announcement. Welcome, friends. We'll get started here in just a second. All right. And so I'll continue to put links in the box as we talk today. And as things come up, we'll add those to the chat box as well. So first off, I want to thank everyone for being here. And I want to definitely thank Clover Hope for coming to us. The joy of the virtual library living and COVID living is we get to have people from all over, not just the world, but all over America. And thank you, Clover, for joining us today from New York. Yay. And we do want to acknowledge that the San Francisco Public Library acknowledges that we occupy the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and as uninvited guests, we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples and wish to pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community. And I'm going to throw in the chat box right now a chat link to a great reading list, resource list that contains information and websites about Indigenous culture, particularly here in the Bay Area. A great website to check out is called Segorite Land Trust, and this is an all women-led leader organization based in the East Bay, and they are focused on land rights issues. And they have an amazing thing called the Shumi tax, which you can pay your tax and as a donation to their organization. So check that out. And this is our second Summer Stride program. Yay, we are well into summer. So we love to highlight all of the things happening in summer and that you can do your summer reading, summer learning, summer exploring. 20 hours gets you our free iconic Summer Stride tote bag. It's a new one every year for San Francisco Public Library. So get your tracker, do your time, get your tote bag. Tomorrow, in person. And yes, I know we are in an uptick in the COVID situation again, so mask up, but come on down. The Correct Auditorium is gorgeous. It's big, we can space out and, spread out. But we have the amazing Bryant Terry, and he is bringing together Black farmers, Black agriculturists, actually a vintner who is based on the 280. I know anyone who's traveled the 280 freeway knows this spot. And who knew that there was a vintner there off the freeway on the 280? So they're going to talk about their agriculture journey and food justice in the Bay Area. So 3 farmers will join us, 3 farm organizations doing work here, mainly in San Francisco, but also in the East Bay. And Bryant Terry will be moderating the conversation. There'll also be books for sale. And this is in our beautiful Correct Auditorium, but also streamed should you not want to make it out. And I'll put the links in for all of that. And some other upcoming events that we have, I'm just going to breeze through these. We have an amazing Balinese chef coming from Bali to promote his cookbook. And I hear he's bringing a food cart. So there might be samples. Don't want to miss that. June 18th, 4 p.m. in the Latinx community room. poetry, West Oakland to West Africa, Sisters Across the Ocean, coming up this Sunday, 11, virtual. And author Chris Manjapara, Black Ghosts of the Empire. And these last two events and Bryant Terry are all in anticipation of Juneteenth. And if that wasn't enough, June is Black Music Appreciation Month, which is why I called Clover Hope and, put out the call to have her come in. And we have two reading lists, which I'll put in the chat box in a moment, that are all some great books about Black music. If you haven't read Little Devil in America, I suggest that book as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Clover Hope today. Clover Hope has written the book, The Motherlode, which highlights over 100 women who have shaped the power, scope, and reach of rap music, including pioneers like Roxanne Shanté, game changers like Lauryn Hill, Missy Elliott, and the current reigning queens like Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, and Lizzo, as well as everyone who came before and after and in between. And that is no joke. This book it's packed. It really is packed. Clover is a Brooklyn-based writer and editor. She's written a range of publications over a 16-year career. She's written for Vibe, Essence, XXL, Elle, Billboard, Wired, the New York Times, Vogue, and many more. She's currently contributing editor at Pitchfork and an adjunct professor at New York University. And this book is available in print as well as in ebook format at all library locations. And you can also purchase it from Abram Books, which is the publisher. And I'm gonna put us both on the screen at the same time. Spotlight. Hi, Clover. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, as I was saying, the book is really, really packed. It's a very comprehensive deep dive into so many amazing women. Similar to Little Devil in America, it took me a long time to get through it because he also goes into like the earworm dive of like also looking up all the songs and then off into the branches of all of the songs as well. I created my own Spotify Motherlode song list. What's nice about the book is I really like the way you laid it out. So you have the never forget and who they are and what to listen to. So you can, even if you just read that section of Clover's book, you would be like so educated. I also, in preparation, checked out Beat Street, which I hadn't seen in probably 20 plus years. And honestly, it still holds up. I swear it does.
It does.
It really does. It was, I made my 17-year-old watch it too. And he's like, I don't know, but he definitely.
Maybe not for the teen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He got through it. So it really is a thick, well-researched deep dive into such amazing women. I have a couple questions that we can start with, which is one, how was your experience publishing during COVID?
Oh, great question. It was difficult, especially as like a first-time author. You kind of want to get that in-person experience of, interacting and engaging with the readers and having the talks, like sitting down and actually chatting in person. And so that was what I was expecting, like when I started out actually working on the book, in the future, in the future, I saw, okay, I'll have to do this little tour. Also, on the other hand, and like it kind of, I think, I've also been teaching classes via Zoom, and there's some pluses and some minuses, in terms of like just being able to kind of have more of like comfort, not like commuting and, like that part of it, the actual logistics is like, okay, this is like economical, I guess. but yeah, I did miss out on, like just doing just even like visiting libraries. I grew up loving libraries. Like I went to the St. Albans branch in Queens where I grew up, and I was there literally every weekend, just like getting new books and like just kind of, like a regular. And just the idea and the presence of libraries I love. So just missing out on that in bookstores, it was difficult. But luckily I was able to, like do a ton of like talks like this, and also do more than I maybe would have been able to do, like if it was in person. So it's almost like a bigger reach, which is nice.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah,
The Queen's Library is very well known in the library world land. They do some
amazing.
revolutionary work. Yeah, they've been really known for some of the groundbreaking work that they do there, especially with like digital literacy and really bridging that gap in the digital divide. So big shout out to the Queen's Public Library for sure.
Yes.
And thank you for being a library kid. That's probably why you agreed to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, I miss my little library card. Yeah,
Well, we can get you set up with one from San
I
Francisco
would
too
love
and
that.
open that up. I think that's a good kind of segue into my next question, which is, um, about the historian side of your work. And, you really did become a historian developing this book and an archivist. And where did you tell us about your methodology and the research and who, what archive has the best hip hop collection?
Mm,
And then you also mentioned a lot in the book, um, a lot of this history had to come from oral histories. And so
right.
was that, how did you find out about those and where did you find those?
Yeah, it's funny, like kind of embracing the historian aspect of it, because like I am sort of like a natural researcher. I started out as a fact checker when I was working at Vibe. That was like my first, actual like paid job. Um, and I love just like looking up things. I'm like just naturally curious. That plays into just being a writer and journalist. And so that curiosity is like, it's not just that I look at the research as like a tedious thing. It is tedious, but I also really do enjoy like finding facts and uncovering things that people either haven't seen or heard about before, or just kind of like it's something that's kind of underlooked or ignored. And so that's was the whole idea behind the book, was that a lot of these women are under unsung or like lesser known. Obviously, you have the Queen Latifahs and Lil Kims and Salt and Peppa, Eve, like those names that a lot of people know about. And then you have, like your Lady of Rage, who was signed to Death Row Records. Or like like some of the artists who maybe only had one song in the 90s, like a Soleil, but they contributed to kind of like this larger conversation about women in hip hop. So the idea initially was that I started out with kind of like 40 or so, that I was gonna try to do entries on 40 women. And then initially I wasn't planning to kind of like speak to so many people. And then the more I kind of like just deep dived and found and tracked down women, and not only the women, but like people who worked with them. So stylists, photographers, directors. I just kind of kept building and got more ambitious. And I was like, I just basically need to do oral histories of these women. And a lot of their stories, like you said, are not something you can Google online. The stories of like MC Sharrock, who was, widely considered like the first female MC. There's a lot about her story that you wouldn't like uncover with a cursory like search. And so I had to, like find her, and she was someone I didn't interview until like the end of the process. I like kept reaching out to her and emailing, and initially it was like I didn't hear back, and she has her own book. And so that was also part of my process. There were a few tiers. One was I knew I needed like existing material, obviously. So I purchased a bunch of books that some of the women had already written. MC Sharrock had written a book about being like the first lady of hip hop. Antoinette was another rapper who had written like a memoir, and she was in this famous like rivalry with MC Lyte. There was the Mercedes Ladies, which was one of the first like female, pretty much the first like female like girl group in rap. And Sherry Cher, who's like the leader of the group, had published a novel that was pretty much like a, fiction, but like they're like real life. And so I, got all of these books and basically like read through them. Queen Latifah's book, so Peppa from Salt and Peppa had a book. Uh, Even like Timbaland, because I needed to get some facts about Missy, so I like got Timbaland's book. Who's a producer who like worked with her. Angie Martinez, who's a radio host who did, like had a brief career as a hip hop artist. I purchased all of these books, and used that as, supplementary material. Also, there's a really great book that Vibe had published. It's more so like a heavy glossy, or like just like a thick magazine where they profiled a few women in hip hop. And it's R&B, it's a hip hop divas, like Vibes hip hop divas. And so I bought that, like just looked it up on Amazon. The other thing was that I bought a ton of like magazines, old magazines, like the Double XL magazine and Source, basically music and hip hop magazines. That had women on the covers from eBay. One of them I had to get from like an Australian like seller. So, all of these, I should actually put them in like a pile or something, like take a picture. So that was part of the process. And then the actual interviews, that was, the longest. Just, I don't know if people like to hear about the, like logistics, but I made a spreadsheet. I love organizing in spreadsheets. I was like, all right, here are all the people I need to contact. And then I would just check off people and, have to track down some people via Instagram and like, in the DMs, like whitepages.com or like, some of the sites where you can kind of like look up numbers. So I pretty much did a really, that was like an ongoing process because a lot of times I would also get contact info from people I already spoke to who would be like, oh, like here's a number for so and so, or you should speak to so and so, and then it just kept building. And so the research process was basically like in phases, and it was fun. It's like very tedious and a lot of just kind of hoping like people respond, and a lot of some people also turned me down for interviews who I would have loved to speak to. And just from like some of the early pioneers or people who worked with them. So it was very much like a tiered process that started with me just wanting to find the new and mix in like, all right, here's the familiar with like, here's the like some like things you can discover basically.
Yeah, that's much deeper than I had thought. Yeah, so you're actually doing like your own source research on this.
Yeah,
It's
a lot of
interesting. Did you like record your oral? You recorded everything?
Yeah, a lot of the one kind of like just I guess weird thing that I had in mind was like I want to be able to have information in this book that you could like populate someone's Wikipedia page with, because it's like all of that stuff has to come from a primary source, and like speaking to the women and the people who work with them, like those are the primary sources. So yeah, it was keeping track of all these recordings. Like I still have all the audios.
Yeah.
And I did transcribe all of them myself, which like later on I was like, people were like, oh, you didn't have a research assistant, but I just also liked listening back to the stories because that did help me with writing the entries, like just hearing them speak over and over and like actually really like getting it in my head basically.
Yeah, I bet that was powerful just to hear them too.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you have like plans for those recordings? Like, could they go into an archive? Have you thought about that?
I haven't thought about it. I haven't thought about it. I'm working on a couple of things, which are like an audio book, and also a docuseries that hopefully will go into development. Maybe there's some use, but that's TV.
That sounds cool. That'd be cool if there was an audio book with the women speaking at the same time. Oh, I'd love that.
yeah, so there's I have audio from like way back, interviews from like years ago. So
Uh-huh.
it from when I had the little mini like tape
Yep.
that we had to record on. Yeah.
Yep. So what is there a library out there that is collecting hip hop archives?
So Cornell has a library that has a source of like old posters. Like there's um digitized version of some of the like old hip hop posters, like party flyers that people would just put up around the neighborhoods when hip hop was just kind of building an identity in the Bronx in the 70s. And so they have a really extensive catalog. And so I looked a lot of those up to even just get information about like years and dates and oh, so this party happened on this date. Like it really is like a really good preservation of like that time because people weren't taking photographs, there weren't video, there wasn't like video evidence of a lot of this stuff happening, like the parties and the emceeing and like breakdancing, and so the flyers are like a big part of that. So Cornell has a great archive, and then I know there's going to be like a hip hop museum opening up in the Bronx in a few years, and they will have like a pretty extensive library of just archives and just physical artifacts and things like that. And I am very much like looking forward to that because that'll be like a first of its kind, basically.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
excellent. I know in
yeah.
the book you mentioned how the flyers were really pivotal in your research as far as like tracking down even who was like performing at these. Like there's no
Hmm.
proof of who was even there. And so
Yeah.
those flyers is like just such volatile ephemera are like so vital to your research.
And for the women, it was basically like proof of their existence. A lot of the women who came early on, who people might not know their names, like a Pebbly Pooh who I spoke to, and she was just like she was a teenager, like getting into rapping, and before it was even called rapping, emceeing and breakdancing. And so when I spoke to them, a lot of them were like, "Well, check the flyers because you'll see that like I did this and this." And that was their proof of like just being visible, basically. And I
Uh-huh.
thought that was interesting because a lot of those like the pre kind of internet times, obviously you're you know the recognition of your career, or like they didn't even have careers. It was just like the recognition of like the activity that you were doing that ended up being this huge phenomenon is not so much on record like it is today, or even in the 90s or 80s. So those types of artifacts are like really important to just like proving to just like make helping these women feel seen, basically, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. And then you mentioned something too, like, even Pebbly Pooh being 14 years old when she started. So many of the women in your book were that age when they first got started. I mean, they're children,
They're
children doing this
teenagers,
where,
yeah.
yeah, just, and then it's no wonder that the longevity of their career couldn't be sustained as far as like even making money or being paid rights and royalties and just being a child getting into it.
And before the like rap was like an industry, which would be like 79 with like rappers Dwight, and when it was actually on physical recorded, like on recordings. So there's so many kind of like probably tapes and 8 tracks and like things like that that have like some audio recordings on it that I'm sure like people like trade or like sell on eBay and stuff like that. But yeah, like this is a time where the voices, they wanted their voices to be heard in some way, and a lot of these were like young Black and brown kids in the Bronx, like in the communities, who were like needed this like creative outlet. And a lot of them were young girls who had circumstances, like Sherry Share of Mercedes Ladies talked about just having to work a job, like for like to kind of like help her mom out. And in between them, they were also kind of like trying to escape a bit. And that's what a lot of what she talked about in hip hop was, that for them it was like this outlet to kind of like funnel energy and it's really amazing to kind of see how it's become now. Um, but yeah, a lot of the girls just want to be recognized for that, basically, the young women.
Yeah. Um, Tell me about your family support for like wanting to be a writer. Like, so I we might have some teens on here because I kind of tried to program this during a time when teens would be able to join in summer. But a lot of parents aren't being like, yeah, go be a writer. Okay, go be,
Hmm.
follow that dream of being a journalist, or a writer. What was your family support like for that?
We were always like, when I think about it, yeah, we were always just kind of like doing art things or like in the arts. I was in like an acting program for a bit, like in dance classes. And like my love of music like comes from my dad just playing records around the house, and he had like a really big collection of vinyls that I would like flip through. Um, and so like and then I was always kind of like writing in my room and reading. A thing that they encouraged a lot was the reading. Like we're an immigrant family. I was born in Guyana, and came here when I was like pretty young, like 1 year old. But my parents like grew up there, and they really just encouraged us to kind of like read. We had a library in our home, just like, shelves of books that I would basically like flip through. And then I would get my own, like, like the teen, like the YA books, that I didn't want them to know I was reading, or like the adult books I didn't want them to know I was reading. And, I had my own little stash, but, they had like encyclopedias that we would just kind of flip through, like Encyclopedia Britannica, and I would just basically kind of grab some of those sometimes and read through them. And so that led into me like just writing poetry. And then I think they definitely like, my both of them I think are like good writers that I didn't really know until later in life, when I would like read something back that they wrote or something and be like, oh, you like you are, like maybe this is where I got it from or whatever. So it was definitely, I think, the arts and just like, and knowledge was encouraged, I think. So I think that was the thing that kind of pushed me into journalism itself, just trying to know things. So I don't know, I'm probably know it all. And like, I just like knowing like random facts and, you know, um,
Excellent.
also like
Now I'm not
uncovering
sure
about
if it was one of the women or you that
it.
said that your dad even was playing records when you weren't even in the house. The music was still going on. Was that
There
you
was
or
always
your
music.
story?
I'm not sure, but it's probably, yeah, like a lot of the women who, like who kind of like come up and decide to get into hip hop. Like they've had it kind of like they've had music or soul music or like, it's a lot of Motown and played around the house. And obviously hip hop is a black music that comes out of like disco and soul and all of that. So it was just always in the car, like in the house, like we had a giant record player. And then I started getting my own CD player, a cassette tape. So it was just naturally bled into me starting to discover my own music eventually, like when I was probably 13, 12, 13.
Yeah, definitely reminiscent of many of the women in the book.
Yeah.
Um, and that also reminds me that, the book isn't, while there's a many women featured either predominantly East Coast or predominantly West Coast, you cover the span of America as far as
Hmm.
this book is concerned. And how did you decide to lay out the book? I mean, it's sort of in chronological order, but you do jump around a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a long process in terms of like how we would like whether it be themed by eras or so it is pretty much just laid out chronologically. And I am from New York. So I didn't want to have this kind of like East Coast bias. And that was also part of like in researching, I discovered like groups and women who I had not really known about growing up, like Conscious Daughters from Oakland. Like I didn't know, that there were, I didn't know that there were so many women. Yeah. Um, and, like I didn't really know about like Mercedes ladies and, like some of the other, some of the, kind of like regional acts in from Miami or like Houston. So that was part of it, just making sure that it was like broad enough, like geographically. Um, and then, yeah, as far as format, like I didn't want it to, like, I love encyclopedias. I didn't want it to read like you were reading an encyclopedia, but that it felt like you were getting a lot of information. So yeah, like you mentioned, there's the, for each person, there's the little nuggets of just the like blurbs. And I come from the world of magazines and print, and I think that just naturally like having like a visual kind of eye or like I love just reading like an explosion of information on a page that you can kind of come back to like now and then. So I wanted to have like the factoids and the graphics and be able to like flip through the book, whether you were doing like a deep dive or just like showing it to someone, where you're like, oh, hey, like here's some information about like, the sequence. And here's a song, like the biggest song they had and like why, a short bio and all that. So that was important to me because, if I want the women to do this to be a thing where like women are like remembered or like, thought of, I wanted it to appeal to the casual hip hop fan or casual music fan and like the kind of like hip hop head who maybe like been in the dirt since like the 80s or whatever. And so like so I wanted it to kind of like be able to kind of have that appeal. So that the format, it took a while to kind of to get get to like the placement right and things like that. But I really like how it turned out, and we always wanted to do illustrations also. That was like Abrams, the publisher, is just very much known for like really eye-popping visual, like very like well-designed books, and so that was like going into it, like I knew it would just look good, and that also made me like feel good as someone who like values aesthetics, like print aesthetics. So the illustrator, Rachelle Baker, is just amazing. So we worked together, and she just really, really like brought it to life. So I really like appreciate her.
She really did. I'm putting in Rochelle's info there right now. Yeah,
She's
so
amazing.
you said some things that triggered was um, the way you did set up the book. So anyone could just open this book and find a nugget for sure, but you can also just definitely deep dive into it. I also like the pages that are like a bust out of a certain kind of genre
Right.
or the factoid pages. So anyone can pick up this book and find great info and entertaining info. It's not necessarily all deep dive like research. It's fun as well. I love these pages. And your
Yeah.
journalist side definitely comes through. And that makes me want to ask, like, as far as like working with Abram, and we like to ask the writing questions and the how to and the publishing side too around in the library world. But so how closely did you work with, like, I want it to be designed like this, I want to work with
Hmm.
Rachelle, I want it to look like this? So how much power did you have in that kind of aspect of getting the book done?
It was great actually. And as a first time author, I was, really glad that they gave me the freedom to have to basically decide, to like every step of the way, like how it was going to look. And so they, like asked me to, like, who are some illustrators you're thinking about? And I found Rachelle, and she is like Detroit based and like worked in a comic book store. I really loved her work. And so I, put her forth. And that was like, like definitely wanted a Black woman to like illustrate it. So, that was one thing. It was like very much like, like free reign as far as that. And then visually the design, the art director, like we worked closely together. Like, they have their team who is like amazing. And so, like bring templates and like, so they, like they're designing it. Like, so totally giving them credit for, like the visual presentation. And so we collaborated, and, I wanted texture and I wanted it to kind of pop, but also feel a little sophisticated. And so, like the cover, everything from like the who would be on the cover as far as like illustrated, to like which women would be illustrated, because not all of them are. Like I pretty much made that decision. And so it was very much like super collaboration, but they gave me like a really good like free reign to make the final decisions, basically. So I'm happy about that. I know, like, I'm not sure, like maybe some people don't get to really have as much say over the cover. But everything from their cover image, everything from like the font, I was like, I'm very specific about fonts, so more particular about fonts. So, I wanted it to, you know, um, just kind of feel like me, basically.
Excellent. And I see a question just came into the Q&A, and I'll put that out to the other folks in the audience. We're happy to take any questions, and I'll see what this question is. Even with the powerful women, there's still a male presence. Do you see this ever changing in the industry? And I did see that
Mm.
for sure in the book, massively powerful women, but also, it's also either seen through the male gaze, or, the industry is controlled by men. And do you ever see anything like that changing in our lifetime? How about your
Yeah,
lifetime?
there's this like undercurrent of that. Yeah, it was Lil Kim's story as far as Biggie being the one who chose her famous like squat pose.
Yeah.
Um, or Salt and Peppa, who had a male producer writing a lot of their like pro women anthems. Um, like it's one of those things where it's the infrastructure, like the music industry is set up in this way where men just have a lot of the final say, or like they're the gatekeepers. I think maybe more and more like women, and especially like women of color, are getting into like higher positions where they can be like have more of like more of a say in like the top order things, which is, I think in most industries, whether it's entertainment, Hollywood, um, a lot of times the issue is not like at the middle level, it's like the top. And it's hard to kind of get people in place at the top who can then like, um, make decisions that benefit, people who have traditionally like had less power. So like, it's I don't know if I see it changing that like completely, but I do see just more like embracing, or like I guess like, you know, people kind of need to be taught to do the thing that is like not just good for like, because like we should just have workplaces that are that have different types of people in them, because that's how the world is. um that should just be the natural thing. Like I think there is a shift more toward that, but I don't, it's hard to say like how like feasible it is, because the music industry is still like the most volatile as far as like, contracts and like things like that. Like there's no union like there is with Hollywood, so, or like no collective union. So it's still pretty rough.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and again, anyone can feel free to ask a question. Some of the things that I loved Salt and Pepper and the feminism side of them, and you do mention that maybe there was a male side to that as well. Um, Another one that I really enjoyed hearing about was Mia X and her embracing of
Hmm.
like a different body type. And um, I think, hopefully, I mean, I have a teenager, which I mentioned to you earlier, and I see those things changing for our youth like that, and they know what's wrong and they know what's right now, and it's vocal. And so I do hope to see some change like that. And in media, it's so hard. I mean, you still um, flip through all of the Amazon, the whatevers, and the Hulu, and it's still just white dominated media. And you're just
Hmm.
like, I mean, I don't want to see it anymore. I'm white and I don't want to see that. I want to see something different, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So I think I have hope that things will change, but yes, uh, it's a top down world still.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
we're seeing like just kind of like little moving the needle kind of like bit by bit.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, the Me Too movement, those things, I mean, our kids know now that,
There
that
is
shit
like
needs to.
a certain base level that they have that we didn't have, even from like, mental health conversations. Like there's a base level understanding and like I think access and resources that they have that like previous generations didn't have that really helps them kind of be more open-minded and be more kind of you know just uh like authentically kind of this way. So yeah, I do appreciate that. And teaching also lets me see that because I'm teaching like teenagers at NYU and like it's really interesting to kind of see their perspective.
Yes. I Yes, this is a great question too, and I'm going to get to that. And I was just telling Clover before we started in preparation, I watched Beat Street and made my kid watch it as well. Um, Definitely had some like he was like, what, okay, but it was so awesome seeing the opening with us girls opening it. I loved the outfit, was all three of the outfits, but the green and yellow sweater, oh my god, I love that so much. So 80s, so wonderful. So if you haven't seen Beat Street, it's still out there. You can find it. We can check it out on
Yes.
DVD at the library. So there's a question: is what are you reading? Fiction, nonfiction? What's on your nightstand?
um, I'm gonna grab a really good book that I highly recommend. And this is from a former, friend and former, like boss of mine, Danielle Smith, and it's Shine Bright, and it's basically a personal history of Black women in pop. It's like amazingly good. Just as you realize, like the number of stories or women who you know their names, but maybe not necessarily a lot of their backstory, or maybe you understand like generally why they were important, but talking about a Gladys Knight and getting really into like the specifics of like why she was important to the pop world and like to like Black music, as that's kind of what this book does. And I like if you like my book or like you, I highly recommend reading that one. Another one similar to that is like the liner notes. I can't find my bookshelf is right in front of me. I can't, but like liner notes from a revolution. I might be getting the title wrong a little bit. Um,
Oh yeah,
and that's
Liner,
another one.
the
Right. Yeah.
intellectual life of Black feminist sound. I
Yes.
got it
And
right
that's
here.
another one that just in this lineage, basically, I would that I'm reading and highly recommend.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you. I love that. And so I'm just going to put it in the chat box one more time here. And I did make two lists. One is for geared towards adults, and one is geared towards children. And these
And thank you,
are,
Katie and Diego.
yeah, yeah. All right. Let's see. I think that I am about ready to wrap up. I don't have any more questions. How about our crowd? Do you have any more questions? I want to thank Clover for being here today and for sharing all of your knowledge. And I know that you are going to, well, yeah, how about what's your next project? What are you working on
Hmm.
now? And I see that I mean, I think you have this knowledge and now you have the history and the archive. You're building your own archive. Honestly, it sounds like that. I know that we will hear more from you, or you will be doing something in the history realm of hip hop. And I think that's
Hmm.
really amazing.
Thank you. I'm like honored to even hear that. Yeah, like the docu series that I'm working on with Lisa Cortez Films. Working on shopping that and getting it developed. The audiobook for the book, so there's some extension past the release date, which was last February now. Uh, and getting a little bit more into like unscripted work as far as like TV. So you'll see some things popping up in the next year or so that I'm working on in the TV realm. And hopefully I can kind of like continue down that lane. I do love, just telling histories, basically telling stories and finding like different perspectives and timelines that people haven't really like gone down. And so if I can just like continue to do that, I think that's like that would be like, satisfying or like kind of honoring the historian title, basically.
Yes. Okay, and I'm going to put in the chat box here really quickly. You can get the book from, of course, the library here, or you can also purchase the book from Abrams or your favorite local independent bookstore. And Clover, as I mentioned, when you find yourself in the Bay Area, please let us know. We would love to host you for an in-person event, and it would be so fun.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thank
Thank
you.
you so
And
much.
thanks
All right.
everyone for coming.
Absolutely. And this will be available on YouTube, so you can watch it there and share with your friends. And Clover, thank you so much for all your amazing knowledge and this really deep book. It's a very deep dive. And like I said, it's entertaining as well. It's not like huge research, but it is at the same time. So great job on your work. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.